This is the first of a 3 or 4-part series that we're doing with area recruiters, kind of to help high school prospects further understand the recruiting process, while also shining a light on the recruiting coordinators within the state of Indiana that are doing an exceptional job. So, Munger, you're the first one. So, just a brief background into Coach Munger. He was an assistant coach at Davidson for 9 years, finishing in 2022 there, where he helped Davidson to a program record in wins in 2022. To that, you came to Notre Dame in 2020, summer of 2022?
Yeah, summer 22.
Summer of 22, elevated to recruiting coordinator after last season. And so you're part of a staff that's really attacked the state of Indiana. I remember when you guys came in, you guys made a big splash, 2022 Future Games. Came in, grabbed Jace Lee, grabbed Cam Sullivan, Mason Barth, RJ Cromartie. So I remember that as kind of your guys' our first intro into you guys as a staff. It kind of, parlays into my first question for you, Ryan. I did some research into, the previous staff that was at Notre Dame before you guys were there. They only took 3 Indiana high school players from 2018 to 2023. And I mentioned you guys came in and, that first year at Future Games, you guys got four really talented players. Since then, in the 2025 class, you guys have Brandon Logan, Caden Kroll, 2 of our top 3 players, already have a really strong start in the 26 class, not only in Indiana, but across the Midwest. So my question for you is, is recruiting the state of Indiana something that's been a priority for you guys as you guys have come in to Notre Dame?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the easy thing was, right, like you mentioned, a couple of really good players who were fits at Notre Dame. So again, when you have good players like those guys, like it does make life easier. But I think for us as a staff, despite Notre Dame's reach, I think one of the things we really wanted to stress and just emphasize, amongst us was just, hey, we've got to do a good job of recruiting the state of Indiana, which is for sustainable success. We feel like we need to, to really appeal to the in-state guys and do a good job with those guys, build relationships with high school coaches, summer coaches in the area, get to know guys like yourself, and just continue to build those relationships. And, hopefully that will continue to help us keep bringing in some talented players like we have over the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to kind of go a little bit deeper in on that, what about those players, your Jace Lee, your Mason Barth, first year at Future Games? What was it about those players, maybe not in particularly, but, as a whole, what is your staff looking for when you're going to go recruit a player?
Yeah. So, one, like I'll give you a shout out. Like I thought your article the other day, you were talking about some metrics that, are important in the recruiting cycle. I think that is a good place to start, right? Like there's a certain, baseline for athleticism and some traits that you are looking for as a coach. And, realistically, I think anytime you can find some sort of like outlier data or metric that you think will really translate to the college game to help you win, I think those are some things that you're going to look for. But especially like on the positional side of things, if you start to look at the way college baseball has been played the past couple of years, offense has really, really come about, especially last year, just the ability to hit the home run. You kind of feel like everybody had the ability to slug. And I think for us, we have to make sure, one, we continue to do that. But I think now the importance of having position players who can play on both sides of the ball, really defend, and also bring that skill set to help us score runs is important. For us, I never know if the wind's going to be blown in, blown out here at the EC. So for us, like we have to make sure that we can score in a multitude of ways. And so, for us, we try to target guys who can get to second base on their own and as much as possible. And I think, for us, that allows us to be a little more versatile with our lineup that we're putting out there each day. But 2, I think it gives, all of the position players an opportunity to sit there and say, hey, I can find a way to crack into the lineup, if I can really maximize maybe my skill set. And that way we're not necessarily pigeonholing ourselves into one type of player, but hey, can we get, some guys who can really bang? Can we get some guys who can really run? Can we get some guys who can do a little bit of both? Just different things like that. And then next thing you know, that just starts to help you stretch the lineup, and it makes it a little bit harder for opposing defenses and opposing teams to kind of game plan to, how to get you out and how to prevent runs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so to go a little bit further kind of on that, but also take a little bit of a turn, when you're starting to identify those players, like how does that process start to happen? I see you and Coach Volts out at a Grand Park. You guys are grinders. You're always out there. And I know if I see one of you two at a field, there is likely going to be really good players playing on that field. So talk to me a little bit about your process of getting to that point, right? Do you guys go in and follow teams? Are there guys that you're coming into a tournament knowing, hey, I need to see this player? Are you guys following stuff that we're putting out where it's like, okay, I saw this video, I really want to go see this kid? Like, how do you start to find those players?
It's a little bit of all the above. I think, part of our jobs as coaches is like we have to build relationships, not just with players, but we have to build relationships with coaches, with high school and summer team, and then guys like yourself. And then that way, again, when I get a call or I get a text from somebody and they're like, yo, like this kid can really play, you need to come check it out. Like that just kind of, makes my life easier of like, okay, now I can go to this event, I can go to this game. And, I've got a checklist of, 3-4 guys playing at this time slot that I need to see, I need to evaluate, and, just keep trying to, figure out, does that guy actually, fit our system? Is he going to fit our development plan or not? And again, that way I can get as many evals on guys as possible. Like that's one of the great things about Grand Park, right? Like you can kind of sit there and you can watch, 4 games at a time. And, if you've got a good list, a good time slot, there's some times where, you can be really, really productive during a 2-hour stretch. But, I think you've got to do a little bit of your homework on the front end, especially for us, like just to figure out like, hey, which kids are actually academic, and then, which kids actually, have the athletic traits that we are looking for as well. And so again, that's where for us, like we usually have to do a lot of homework on the front end with some of the people that we trust and say, hey, who do we actually need to spend our times evaluating and following and figuring out, if they could be a potentially good fit at Notre Dame.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And so when does that process start with a player, right? Because we've had some changes in the recruiting landscape here in the last couple of years. Mason Barth's a good instance. When you guys picked him up after the future games, it was after his freshman year. You fast forward to now that, that would have been a 2027 last year. Now that you can't talk to that player yet. So I know this summer you're going to be locking in on 27s. Does it start before that? Are you guys locking in on, our preseason all states? Are you guys following those 27s now, trying to get prepared? I mean, are there 28s that you guys are like sneaking around on, putting on your board? Hey, I like this video. Like, how early is that process, or does it just start in the summer?
Right now, I would say like for 27s, I would like to think I'm relatively locked in on that group of guys, just so I've got something to follow throughout the spring. We're relatively unique in the fact that we can't really utilize the transfer portal just as far as undergraduate guys. So for us, like we will always be a very high school, development program. And so for us, like we feel like we do need to, always know, especially in the state of Indiana, like which are the best players, which are the best players that fit Notre Dame. And again, we can't really communicate with those guys, but the more that we hear about them, the more evals we can get on them. It does make our life easier when we can start to communicate with those guys of like, yeah, man, I've gotten 35, 40 at bats under you. I feel like I've got a pretty good idea of what type of player you are and aren't. Futures games is obviously so impactful because you get to see some of these high-end guys compete against other high-end guys, and those are some really good evaluations to have. But you don't always want to be pigeonholed into saying, hey, I got to see this guy have 6 at-bats versus, some of the best arms in the country. Like, you will have days where you can't hit those guys, right? Like, that's just part of the game. And so, the more data, the more information I'm able to acquire throughout the summer helps me make a few more informed decisions rather than just going off of futures games. So, for us, beginning, June, we'll definitely be watching plenty of 2027s.
Nice. Awesome. So for you guys, it's kind of the future games, kind of the culmination, you're following these guys all year, and then you kind of get to see them go compete against players that they're equally as talented or even better than them. Right.
Yeah.
Are you guys trying to get those 27s, 28s to camp right now, 26s to camp, or how does your guys' camp process kind of work? Are you guys wanting to bring in as much talent as you can for those?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were able to run a few camps last summer, and I think that really helped kind of put a couple 27s, high up on our board because we felt like we actually got to be around them for a couple days. They got to be around our coaching staff for a couple days, and you're kind of like, yeah, man. Like in the old rules, like we'd probably try to offer you and try to get you committed. In the current rules, like you can't do that, but you at least have a little bit of a relationship now of like, all right, man, like these are a couple guys who seem like great fits. They wanted to be here on campus, so like they've shown some interest. So I think that was a really good start. I think this summer, I would love to be able to have a couple really high end 27s be able to come to camp. That way we can continue to build some of those relationships, continue to watch them play, but more so just they get an opportunity to spend time with us and they get to kind of figure out if we're a fit for them or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And that relationship piece is key in the recruiting process. You've touched on it multiple times here. So many players they see the glitz and glamour of college baseball, and that's what they want to talk about, right? But the most important thing really is the relationship process, because for those players, they are coming in and they're going to play for you for 3-4 years. Be around you every single day. It's got to be somebody that you have to be somebody that they like. They have to be somebody that you like, right? Like. And so that kind of parlays again right into my next question of, for all the changes that are going on in the recruiting landscape right now, what pieces of advice do you have for that upcoming 2027 prospect? What should they be doing, right now? What should they be focusing on? What should they be doing entering the spring and the summer to make sure that, schools that they're hoping to go to see them? What kind of advice do you have for those guys?
The first thing I try to tell guys is just watch the college game. I think you learn a lot by just, watching the level that you want to get to. The speed of the high school game to the college game is so different. The speed from the college game to minor league professional fame is so different. And so I think there's a lot of things you can look at. And if you try to look at it a little bit more from the bird's eye view, you can, not necessarily just your own, but like, okay, hey, how is college baseball actually being played? And how does my skill set necessarily fit in that? And again, what tools, what traits do you have as a player? Like, how do you maximize those and say these traits will translate into being successful at the college level? Because so often, I have conversations with parents too, and they're like, yeah, this kid's a really good high school player. Like, we're shocked he's not getting recruited more. And it is difficult because like you see plenty of those good players, and it's the same thing when you get to the college game, right? Like you say, hey, there are plenty of good college players that don't end up getting drafted. And, you talk to pro scouts or you talk to college scouts, it's a very similar statement of, yeah, he's a good player at this level, but I don't know what tool or what trait he has right now that translates into him getting to the big leagues. I don't know what trait this high school kid has that translates into him getting on the field and those tools showing up every single day. And so I think once you can kind of sit there and objectively say like, okay, I know my power tool can show up, my speed tool can show up, my ability to defend can show up, pitchers that like, hey, I can throw 92 in the zone consistently every day and that can show up. So like, okay, man, you're a real arm. So I think that is always a good place to start because, when parents get kind of sucked into like, yeah, Johnny's hitting 372 in high school. And like, that's great. Like I want everyone to be successful, but like, it's not apples to apples when you're looking at batting average, right? Like, because again, you can get a bunch of blue pits and that doesn't mean you're bad or a good player. But then all of a sudden you face a high end arm, or you face a committed guy who's going to go play high end baseball. And then all of a sudden you get your doors blown off. Like you don't look like a player who's capable of handling that jump to the next level. So I think there's always a little bit of self-evaluation that has to happen just to try to figure some of that out. The next thing I'll tell guys is just, get in the weight room. Like everyone wants to do the skill specific strength, and I'm not ever against that. But I think before you start seeing those dividends really show up, you have to hit like a certain baseline of just general strength that will show up every single day. In terms of like the guys who show up in our program and, the freshmen that I watch in the ACC that are able to play every day in this league, they just show up stronger than the rest of their class. somebody put it out last year. There was like only one freshman who was playing in Omaha who was under 200 pounds.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so again, it doesn't mean you have to be big and strong and that's the only way to do it. But like the game has changed a little bit. And again, there's so much more baseball. There's so much more volume that occurs at the college game than the high school game. So you have to have the ability to hold up, under that day in and day out, work and games and everything that's going on. And so, if you show up, as a skinny guy, like it's going to be hard to sit there and say, hey, you will have the ability to be productive every single day. I graduated college in 2013. I got there in the fall of 2009, and I was a catcher. I showed up at 6'2", 165 pounds, skinny dude. We had a freshman who showed up last year and started, probably 30 games for us, but he got hurt. Freshman catcher, 6'2", 6'3", and he caught it 220. Like the game has changed a lot. Okay. And again, he's a way better player than I ever was, but just from a physicality standpoint, like it's not the same as it was, even 10, 15 years ago. So like if you show up without that, prerequisite strength, it's going to be really hard. And, you'll hear a lot of parents or players like, yeah, once you get me in a college weight room, like I'll really take off. Like, nah, man, like we want to recruit the biggest, fastest, strongest kids we can and make them bigger, faster, and stronger. Like we don't want to have these projects that take 3 years to get that strength before that, the skill set finally shows up. Like, again, we got to bring guys in as freshmen who can help us win ball games. Like, the days of just sitting on the bench for 3 years doesn't exist. I mean, kids transfer out when they sit for 2 years anyway. So like you want guys who want to come in and play as freshmen and have that strength. So, I think those are a couple things that I would really recommend, trying to do to put yourself in a position to be successful and, get some of those phone calls that you're looking to have or some of those conversations that you are looking to have, in terms of preparing for how to handle, the phone calls that come, like for the high end guys who have to be on the phone all day. Like I'd say rest up. It's there's always a couple guys who get way more calls than everybody else, and that's just part of it. Those guys usually don't remember half the things that are said on their phone calls, like you're not going to. So, I would tell you to try to have some way of, organizing your thoughts, organizing, hey, which coaches did I talk to? Who did I talk to? And again, what that process looks like is different from everybody. But, if you can slowly start to pick things apart that, distinguish certain schools from others, certain coaches from others, I think that will allow the player, the family to sit there, maybe feel more comfortable with certain programs, start to build a little bit better relationship with certain programs.
Munger, that was gold. That was gold. All of it. I loved it. I just, especially from, last year, seeing our guys at future games that were a little bit overwhelmed with phone calls, right? Like giving them the idea of, hey, you need to be organized, have kind of an idea of what you want going into this. It's going to make it a lot easier for you. And then again, like I love the physicality piece, right? Because especially at the high school level, there's so much low hanging fruit for high school players.
Right.
You get stronger, you're going to be faster, you're going to hit the ball harder, you're going to throw better, and you're going to control your body better. Right. And so, but again, to your point, so many people are like, oh, well, as soon as I get to a college weight room, then all that stuff will happen. That's when the secret sauce will happen. Again, it's almost like that's too late, right? Because I see some of our guys that are freshmen on campus with you guys now that, they already came in as exceptional athletes. And then I see them 6 months after and they look like machines, right? And I saw Noah Coy a couple weeks ago in the facility, and he looks like he's 10, 15 pounds stronger and still, the same kind of body composition. I've seen some video of Jace Lee, and he looks like he's starting to put on some weight. So, that kind of goes into my next, I want to turn this a little bit into some development. I was talking to Noah, and he was talking to me about how much you love development. He's like, I love working with Munger in the cages. And to go a little bit beyond that, I always talk with guys, whenever they're about to go through the recruiting process. And I always ask them this question, what do you care about most? Whether that's education, whether that's development, playing time, guys give me all kinds of different answers. But one of the most common answers is development, right? And oftentimes it's just development. And so I always ask the player, like, what is development to you? And so that's the question I'll pose you. What is development to you? What is development like at the University of Notre Dame?
So this starts a little bit from our head coach, Coach Stifler. And so, we talk a lot about development as a program, and, he challenges us as coaches. He says, before you can ever develop the player, you have to develop the relationship first. So I will say, like, development for us starts during the recruiting process, right? Because, one, hey, if we get those kids committed, great. But that doesn't mean the process is done. That doesn't necessarily mean a kid fully trusts me the same way he's going to trust his hitting coach who he works with 3 or 4 times a week, right? Like, at the end of the day, you trust the people that show up and work with you every day and are in the cages and things along those lines. And then all of a sudden, like, you keep putting in the work with them, they keep putting in the work with you. Then you develop trust between the two of you. And then, I can have a conversation with Noah Coy, and, we can sit there and say, okay, hey man, how does this feel? Do you like it? He can come to me and be like, hey coach, I was thinking about this. What do you think? And sometimes I'll be like, 1, that's a great idea. 2, sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's a terrible idea. Don't think about that. But again, like, we can have that relationship now. And Coy's like, all right, cool. Thanks, coach. Typically it doesn't go that way. I'm always like, all right, let's try it. If it feels terrible, then we'll throw it away. But, I think, again, the relationship piece is where the development side of things really has to occur for, 1, the player, but 2, for us as coaches. And so I think, 1, we really want to start being able to communicate, build that relationship with the players before they even get to campus. That way, again, when guys get here, they show up, they're open-minded, and they're like, yes, coach, like, hey, that's awesome. Like, can I continue to do some of this? Can we? And I'm like, yes, man, like, let's do what's always made you a good player. And then let's try to build on that. But in terms of, like, what does development look like for us? It, not to be speaking the gray area or give you coach speak, but, like, it depends a little bit on the player, right? Like, you mentioned Jace Lee and Noah Coy, like, they're 2 different types of players, right? Like, Jace is tall, lanky outfielder who's going to hit for some power and run a little bit. Like, Noah Coy, left-hand hitting infielder who can really, really run. He's got some strength too that, like, he can impact the baseball. So, like, those 2 guys do work a little bit on different things in their swing. And so, where those guys have both been great is, we try to give them a little bit of a kind of a buffet style, like, hey, here's some big picture things I think all good hitters do. Now, hey, Jace, you need to pick a couple from here. Noah, you need to pick a couple from here. They get to have some ownership of it, but we're still giving them some guidance of it. And again, I think anytime the player has enough ownership in his own development and his own program, he's more likely to buy into it. Like, very rarely, I have 2 kids now, so it's kind of like being a parent, but very rarely do you sit there and tell your kids or your players exactly what they have to do, and then they're going to listen. Like, they want to sit there and be able to have a conversation with you. And when they get to have a little bit of ownership in their own development, they will be able to buy into it. Because again, if I just sit there and tell them they have to do something, well, the first time it doesn't go right, well, then they're going to be like, well, Coach Munger told me I had to do this and it didn't work, so I'm going to blame him, because that's the easy way out. But when, we've, built up a relationship, we've sat there together and kind of tried to figure out, hey, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, you're bought into it, I'm bought into it. And then through the ups and downs, we kind of keep working through it. So I think that's a big piece of it. And again, you look in the weight room, I think our strength coach does a great job of, he'll kind of bucket some guys as well. And, hey, these guys need to add general strength. Hey, these guys need to develop power. These guys need to, work on, maybe more mobility or stability sides of things. So, like, there's kind of an umbrella of what our lifts look like, but then there's also going to be some individuality that occurs within it depending on what our athlete needs. So I think there will always be some nuances to each guy. But again, I think for us, if we do a good enough job in the recruiting process, we're able to kind of figure out, hey, how does this guy fit into the program? What does he need? What does he already do well? That translates into us helping us win ball games. And then what do we do to help him, reach his goals of wanting to be a professional ball player?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love you talk about individualization there, because I know for me as a As a former player, I always loved that. I loved whenever a coach was able to come to me and it's like, hey, no, this is what I was thinking about you with this. This is what I think will make you better. And like you talked about, it makes a relationship better. It makes it easier for the player to trust you because they know that you're coming in with something to make them better, them as an individual better. And again, I think that's gold, right? Like, I love that. You know, it's the reason that you guys are having a ton of success up there. But that's awesome. I love that you dive into that. You know, I don't want to, we could talk on here all day about recruiting. Honestly, I could pick your brain and sit here and listen all day. I've gotten a ton of good nuggets out of this, as I'm sure our high school parents and players that listen to this will as well. But I kind of want to wrap this up with just a brief little outlook on Notre Dame Fighting Irish for this spring. How's the team looking as you guys are preparing for, you know, who do you guys open up with this season?
We got North Florida weekend one, so we'll
at North Florida. North Florida. How are you guys preparing for North Florida, and what do you guys? What's the outlook for you guys this year?
Good. I'm really excited about this group. It's different because we will probably be one of the few programs that will be younger in college baseball, just with the way, you know, the transfer portal works. And again, Notre Dame, us as a coaching staff, like it just, you know, the transfer portal isn't a thing. And so, you know, we've got a good sized high school class that showed up as freshmen now. And, you know, a couple guys you mentioned, like they're going to see their name in the lineups a lot this year. The good thing is I think we've got enough depth where, you know, no one's being handed a job, right? Like those Jace Lees, Noah Coys, like they're going to have to earn every at bat that they're going to get. But I think they will, because they've had to earn it, I think they will sit there and feel some confidence, you know, when they are playing as young guys. And again, like you look around the ACC and there are plenty of freshmen who play at a really high level. So I'm excited to see those guys play. You know, we had a couple of fall games this fall, and, you know, I thought some of the freshmen looked great. I think in one of the games, you know, maybe 4 of our top 6 or first 6 hitters in the lineup were freshmen this year. So again, those guys are going to play big roles and big impacts for us. And, you know, you've seen some of the older guys continue to develop. You know, you got, you know, what looked like a couple draft picks in the junior class that I think will play some big roles. You know, you had some freshmen who played well and played at a high level last year. So if they can continue to, you know, develop the way that I think they have, I think those guys will have, you know, bigger and better seasons than they even did last year. So I'm very optimistic. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, people in the media are going to pick us to win the ACC this year, but I do think we've got a real shot to surprise some teams and some people this year, just with the talent, the program, and just kind of the way we'll play.
That's exciting. That's exciting, especially when you start to factor in, you know, the great work that you and Coach Volts have done in the recruiting process. You know, you guys got a couple really, really strong classes coming in behind that 2024 class that you're saying has a chance to impact your guys' team as freshmen. So, you know, the future is bright in South Bend, that's for sure. Ryan, I can't thank you enough for sitting on here, giving us all that information. You know, I think this something I like about being able to, you know, interview you, chat with you here, you know, and letting high school parents, players listen in on this conversation is they're going to be able to hear from you, you know, what truly matters. And that's something that I think is completely invaluable in this game. There's a lot of bad information out there as there is good information, right? And so hearing it straight from you is something that I think is gold. So I can't thank you enough for your time. And I'm excited to follow the Fighting Irish this spring.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Coop. And again, I look forward to seeing you some this spring and the summer, but absolutely go Irish.
Oh, I'm sure our paths will cross at Grand Park at a high school field at some point this year. So can't wait to see you, man. I appreciate it.
Sounds good. See you, Coop.
See you, man.